hemisphere is built. Because unless those efforts had been begun in some little corner by some small group, they would have remained a colony indefinitely and could never have developed into this big international giant, so-called superpower. But the ruling establishment has not been able to maintain the heritage, and every one of us knows now that the United States is in serious financial problems. Having attracted a diaspora from the Caribbean and elsewhere, far afield as the land of opportunity, it is now groping in the dark about its own problems, having given instructions to the world and police the world all over the hemisphere. It is now in serious problems, and for the benefit of those who live here, citizens and non-citizens, we hope that the solutions to be found will be founded in the interest of the masses of the people who live in this country, and not merely as in the past, in the interest of the monopolies who exercise extraordinary power. You're not unaware of the fact that the American masses have been very vigilant about their democracy, and that in formal terms it does exist. But in this month we must think of the fact that the minorities, as they are called, the Native Americans and the African Americans and other non-white groups, are still without power in the country as a whole, in the republic as a whole. There's a mayor here and a mayor there. But so far as the destinies of this republic are concerned, it is left to two main parties. There is no real pluralism so far as the sharing of power is concerned. Now in Guyana we have a dictatorship which is constitutional. That is to say, they have a parliament, they have courts, they have everything. All the signs of a democracy are there. But they also have mechanisms within those structures that prevent an expression of the democratic will of the people. And the basis of this is racial insecurity, a matter in which many of you know I have not been slow to express the racial insecurity of a particular group in the past and of other groups today. Because the interracial situation is such that Afro-Guyanese are sometimes unwilling to come forward in bold political initiatives because a rapidly reducing number of them want to know if it's going to result in an Indian takeover. Indo-Guyanese, on the other hand, are saying that there is an African takeover which doesn't seem as if it has any way of ending. And we have to speak about these psychological fears, the psychological unease. I'm sure you can see right away that no progress will be possible without it, no real progress. And so we have campaigned from the time of Walter Rodney until now for a genuine multiracial power of the working people. Genuine multiracial and democratic power of the working people, to use the exact words that we have refined in proclaiming what we stand for. And the Guyanese people respect this very much because we do not run from the race problem in Guyana. We do not accuse others of being racist. But we discuss the racial problem as one inherited from colonialism and worsened by bankrupt political leaders who could only see politics as a means of personal power. And that is where the dialogue fits in, because we are calling this party which ruled Guyana for the last quarter of a century as a one-party state, in fact, if not in law, to come to a national dialogue and discuss these things that affect Guyanese. We have not mentioned the condition of Amerindians, because there are numerous Afro-Guyanese and Indo-Guyanese who have a national presence, a national voice, and whatever their point of view, can speak at public meetings and in the capital or anywhere. But the Amerindians cannot, they don't have the facility. There's no law banning them from doing it, but they don't have the social means of doing it. So they are at the margins. And Guyana will never be democratic until that is redressed and corrected. When we talk of the culture of dictatorship, we can select certain dramatic examples of how it expresses itself. There is, for example, the People's Parade. This is a thing that takes place every February. And you see large numbers of working people walking along the streets, some of them even looking unhappy. Originally, it used to be that if they didn't go, they didn't get their day's pay. It's usually on a Saturday. And if they did not turn up to that so-called People's Parade, they did not get their day's pay. It was like driving a flock of cattle along the streets. And marching with them would be the director of public prosecution and all the people. Everyone was called upon to be there. The first time it was held, the organizer said it was a national event and appealed to people, but they are appealing to the people and coercing behind the scenes. When you arrive, you have to sign up to a comrade who has a list so that notice is taken of your presence or absence. It has been refined now, and what happens is that if you are not there, you are penalized in receiving your merit increments, because that goes down as community activities. Now, the first year when it was very successful due to this coercion behind the scenes, having advertised it as a national event, the organizer got on the radio and said, what a beautiful birthday present it is for the leader. The second spectacular expression of the culture of that dictatorship is mass games. Mass games is a thing on which a lot of money is spent annually. A lot of school children are taken away from their normal classes for months, away from their lessons, to prepare these dances borrowed from North Korea. It's a North Korean form of cultural manifestation. When in Guyana we have so many native games that have not even been explored, and we have artists there and people who can make dance patterns of all these games and make a mass games out of things that we have there, like Chirsal and Hulya and things like that, and others not even known to me, Amerindian games and all sorts of games. But we had to borrow it from North Korea. And one year the dictator's image was one of the figures they were putting together in the dances and the books, as they call them. There is a widespread protest now against that. All this has led to a drop in the educational standards, because we are the lowest in the CXC as the CXC performers. Everyone who has really studied abroad or gone to any kind of school outside of Guyana knows and always keeps saying that Guyanese used to be in the forefront. I don't like to say, but this is how they say it, and they seem to be on good ground, of students anywhere in the world, even in colonial times. If it is still so, they must be very few, because at home the failure is immense. There are no textbooks in the schools, there are no teachers in the schools. Teachers are migrating to the Caribbean, where they get better pay. And they're going there to fill the places of teachers who are also migrating from the Caribbean to these parts. So the Caribbean is suffering a hemorrhage, and Guyana's hemorrhage is perhaps the most important of all. People are said to be leaving the country at a rate of 1,000 a month. And we have information that 1 in every 6 Guyanese has applied for immigrant status, perhaps in this country. The important thing, though, about Guyanese, and when they come to this country, and many people say Guyanese don't take part in political activity. We had a meeting on Sunday in which people were castigated for not turning out in large numbers, like the Latin Americans. And this comparison was being made all the time. And I said I could testify about Guyana, because in Guyana, in the culture of the dictatorship, it was an offense to be what they called political. People were transferred for being political. If you resist on the job, or some supervisor, or some political leader, if a politician goes somewhere and you ask a question, you get a response, you're political. And that means you're a marked person from that day. And many immigrants in the United States of America today are people who have been deemed political. Nothing else might have happened, but everyone understands the term. So these are political rulers, politicians then, ruling the country for all these years and blaming the youth for being political. So that the present generation of young people, if they want to be politically active, they have to be prepared to defy the state. And a good many of them have not been prepared to do that. So that what they are doing, apart from the assassination of Walter Rodney, a resource not only of the present but of the future, they are discouraging the best representatives of the masses of people from taking part in politics. Yet the country will have to be governed so long as it is a country. Now how can you then, in all seriousness, blame people for being political when you have a constitution that says it has elections, it has a parliament, it has courts, it allows freedom of expression and freedom of association, yet people are penalized for being political? It's a very deep aspect of the culture of the dictatorship, which has paralyzed people spiritually as well as culturally and politically. Many of the people, I believe, in this very Evergreens are people who fell under that description at home. Many of their relatives have actually suffered victimization and have been forced to leave the country. So in calling upon you and reminding you that you have a job to do, let us examine what it is we have to do out here in the United States or wherever we are. I want to recommend very seriously that Guyana is dying. They had a report the other day called the McIntyre Report, a report of a Commonwealth group, and it underlined the fact. You remember the last time I was here, I said that between 1984 and 1987, the infant mortality rate had increased by 50%, from 32 per thousand live births in 1984 to 49 in 1987, an increase of 50%. Now McIntyre comes and finds, they give him the figure of 50 per thousand. It's not true. It's much higher than that. But these figures are carefully doctored. The hospital, it means that the child care system has broken down. Guyana is a place that had maternity and infant welfare clinics during colonial times. It was not left to independence to bring those things in. And it seems now that the children are the first casualties of the economic failure and decadence of this country. And we take a very strong position on this infant mortality rate. And we have called on them to set a target for reducing it by at least 50% within 4 years. We have made that call inside Guyana. And this is a focal point of what we have to do in the reconstruction of Guyana. It means that things will have to be so reorganized that the children can survive. Not only their first year, but survive indefinitely. The present economic recovery program is said to be export-led. It is a program hammered together between the government, the ruling party, and the IMF. The opposition parties at the time demanded involvement, especially those in the National Assembly, demanded to be consulted. We even called upon the IMF to come and hold hearings in Guyana because we wanted the wider public outside of the ruling party to be able to give information and give their sense of how an IMF program would affect the population. This was unheeded. The Minister of Finance told us one day in the National Assembly, when we called, before this motion had been moved or debated, the talks with the opposition and all the social forces, that the opposition has no resources to offer. The economic recovery program was about the gathering of resources, and the opposition had none. And in fact, from their experience, talking with the opposition was a waste of resources. He was referring to various conferences they have had from time to time with the official opposition party, the PPP, because we have never talked with them until January 5th about the shape of the dialogue. So this economic recovery program that we have, which is export-led, let me show you how it is performing. Guyana is importing chicken every Christmas. It is importing eggs. It is importing ham and bacon. Things in which Guyana was self-sufficient many, many years ago. And that is an export-led recovery. So how are you conducting an export-led recovery when you are importing what you used to be self-sufficient in, and perhaps used to export at some point of time in the past? But the whole paralysis is due to the fact that the government has no confidence. No one has any confidence in the government. People cannot survive on the minimum wage and have to find devious means of survival. Devious means of survival, including the weekend trading and other less honorable activities. The drug trafficking is spreading like wildfire, and it is well known in Guyana that it is in fact suspected that some of the most prosperous individuals are in the game. So we have come to the conclusion that there can be no economic recovery without a political, a democratic recovery. The economic recovery program, however, contains certain things that should be of interest to Guyanese living abroad. And we are discussing this in the interest of Guyana. You know, Clive Thomas once said that it is possible for nations to disappear, and gave the example of Poland, which perhaps more than once in its history had disappeared from the map. If the population of Guyana continues leaving at the rate it is leaving, Guyana, for all practical purposes, will disappear from the map, quite apart from the fact that the Venezuelans are claiming a good slice of it. And the same Mr. McIntyre, whose name is given to this Commonwealth Group report, has been selected by the Secretary General of the United Nations to use his good offices between Guyana and Venezuela to recommend a settlement, to offer a settlement. The Guyanese people are in the dark about what is happening. We only know that President Hoyt, in an interview a few months ago, created an outcry by saying he did not rule out ceding of territory in this settlement. This same Venezuela is now our main supplier of petroleum products, which we used to get from Trinidad and Tobago, but we owe Trinidad and Tobago about $500 million Guyana dollars debt, mainly for oil. And as you know, we beggared the Caribbean multilateral clearing facility. They had about 100 million US to lend to governments to conduct trade, and we borrowed about 90 plus million of it. And have not paid back 90 cents, so far as I know. So we are really a liability on CARICOM. And you will see, if you have a copy of that motion, that point was made. The economic failure not only affects Guyana, but the wider CARICOM economy. However, the government has declared that it is interested in a vigorous private sector. We have no problems with that. We have made that declaration long ago, unambiguously. The government machinery, for all practical purposes, the declining numbers of managers are overloaded with supervising enterprises. Our last auditor's report for the national accounts is for the year 1981. What practical use can an auditor's report, even if it comes up now for 1982, be to people who are currently looking at the fiscal management and the economic management, the treasury and everything, the various enterprises in the country? What can it be after a decade, almost a decade? But we have auditors' reports. You can't say we don't have them. There's no law abolishing them. They can be produced. But we are 9 years late. In the meeting in Brooklyn yesterday, there were several questions from the floor about economic development. Many people there are wondering whether this drive to attract foreign capital has anything to do with them. We know that the petroleum drilling is going on, oil drilling is going on, and we know that that has to be done by a foreign company. Good. These oil drillers are big multinationals, and you either have them or you don't drill any oil. Secondly, the gold industry is in a different position. We have 100 years tradition in gold mining in Guyana. It perhaps began with the Amerindians, because they live in the gold mines. The Africans, mainly from Suriname and then from Guyana, and then from the Caribbean, came in and developed it. And now it is a multiracial industry. Every racial group in Guyana is engaged significantly in the small mining industry. The wealthier portion is dredges, and the less wealthy portion as pork knockers. But no attention is given to this sector. All the incentives are for the foreign companies. And President Hoyt has boasted that about 14 of them are interested. We have said it seems as if they want to finish the gold by the year 2000, by these heavy mining companies, and neglecting the native sector of this gold mining industry. Further, it is about the only Caribbean country that has gold. And I hope tomorrow night we can develop that theme a little more in the interest of the Caribbean integration in this world that is becoming more and more hostile. The Caribbean is faced with isolation and nothing less. So the question is whether non-resident Guyanese here wish to take advantage of this reopening of the private sector in Guyana, and how they can do it. We feel that some organization should be established here that can keep in touch with people in Guyana, non-governmental people, to get information and to start preliminary inquiries. There are many things that non-resident Guyanese could take over, which are being taken over by foreigners. But no survey has been carried out. They do not know what resources there are abroad. It is obvious that if a country is losing resources rapidly at home, it must take an inventory of its resources abroad, if it still wants to be a country, because it cannot be a country without human resources. And it is the human side of reconstruction that we are at present discussing. So our recommendation is that some kind of consultancy be set up. There are people here with the necessary gifts and training to set up such a body. I will not tell you come back home tomorrow, because the first thing will face you is lack of electricity. And when you press your button, you will get no response. I couldn't find several documents to bring because of a blackout at the time when I was supposed to be packing. But we had electricity for Christmas, you see. But none for production. So perhaps that is a priority. Let them rejoice and spread joy at Christmas time. And then we go back to unexpected spells of darkness and lack of power. This is one of the things I think we can do very well out here. And the Working People's Alliance will be prepared to develop a service. In fact, we formed a discussion, Brother WAZIR, MOHAMED, and I, and the brothers and sisters in New York decided yesterday that we are going to prepare a periodical economic bulletin and send it out here for reproduction and distribution to interested persons as a way of beginning to gather resources for the reconstruction of Guyana. Now, everyone knows that Guyana is stinking with corruption. There is no the power barge affair. When the power barge came there, several months late behind its schedule, we immediately smelled something going wrong. You know, we have had the responsibility of running out several confidence tricksters from that country. People like Chappelle, who came there with grand schemes to open a bunker in the interior. We wrote this in a book on secret havens or some such thing. The offshore banking man. The offshore bank was to be the thing to turn on Guyana. There was not a single offshore bank. Although the law was passed in 1986, we voted against it. We voted for the petroleum bill, but we voted against this offshore banking and warned them of what was to come. Soon after, Chappelle ended up in some jail in the United States of America for business fraud. This is a man who, white American citizen who used to hang out in the Bahamas. Then there was this waste project, which they were going to bring foreign waste from a California company to process in Guyana to turn, they said, into electricity. Well, we had the distinction of leading the agitation against that waste project. And I should like to congratulate those non-resident Guyanese who took it up here with great vigor in various parts of the United States of America and England, and they had to go into reverse gear. And they have announced that that particular project is not on. And since then, Mr. Hoyt has become a leading environmentalist in the international community. I heard him being quoted in Malaysia as one of the leading lights on environmental concerns. Little did they know that he nearly drowned the land in poison. So this is something we are going to ask you to consider. To give you a few concrete ideas about suffering in Guyana. The minimum wage is, in round figures, $36 a day, 36 Guyana dollars a day. That is a little more than $1 US at the official rate. The official rate is 33 to 1. After the 1989 budget, the prices of rice, wheat and flour, gasoline, and cooking oil and a few other staples went up by 3 times, and in some cases more than 3 times. So at once, the family is told you can't eat. And this is what led the workers of Mackenzie, the bauxite workers, to walk off the job, down tools without any union. The union had to run after them and confirm the strike. And the sugar workers followed. And a general strike in the export sector developed. It was our hope that that strike would be held out long enough to bring the government to the bargaining table, at least with the unions representing those workers. That would have set a qualitative change in the behavior of the dictatorship because they want the foreign exchange. A Canadian reporter, and Canada is one of the most active countries in the support group back in Guyana. The Canadian High Commissioner went on the television to congratulate the government on its budget. And we had to picket the High Commission. He was unrepentant. But today they are rethinking their position, it would seem. The minimum